Turn to Proverbs chapter 1 and verse 8. Proverbs 1:8. It says, "My son, hear the instruction of thy father, and forsake not the law of thy mother." So this is the first of two Proverbs that we're going to look at tonight, and Solomon starts this one out with, "My son," and showing us that his son is the intended recipient for this collection of Proverbs. And this is actually the first of 22 verses, 22 times when Solomon says in the book of Proverbs, "My son." And so we see here that it's clearly written from a father to a son. And as I mentioned, I think it was in one of the earlier studies, that there is that direct application. But of course, these Proverbs are not only useful to Solomon's son, they're useful to all of us because Solomon was a prophet writing under the inspiration of God, and we're God's sons. So this is God's word to his sons as well as Solomon's word to his son. Now, I don't know how many sons Solomon had. I was thinking about this today. He quite possibly could have had thousands of them because he had 700 wives and 300 concubines. So when you have 1,000 women, you could have a lot of kids, right? Assuming that he was, a normal man and had tendencies like normal men do, and if you had 1,000 women, yeah, you could have a bunch of kids. So I would say hundreds at least, if not thousands. And I would say the only way that you could possibly take care of that many kids is if you were a king and had the largesse of all of the people supporting you and all the riches that Solomon had. He would have had to have all that riches just to put food on the table. But one son that we know in particular that he had was named Rehoboam. And Rehoboam ended up taking the throne when Solomon died. But because Rehoboam was a fool, he only took the throne of 2 of the tribes, and a man named Jeroboam took the other 10. But if these words were written to Rehoboam, which they very well might have been, especially since Rehoboam was the one that would be heir to the throne, this instruction of Solomon fell on deaf ears. If you look at 2 Chronicles 10 and verse 8. 2 Chronicles 10 and verse 8. Rehoboam, whenever he took the throne, initially did something wise, and he got counsel. He got counsel from the old men first, which was wise, and they told him that your father Solomon was a taskmaster, and he really was pretty heavy on the people. And he said, just lighten up a bit, and they'll serve you forever. And then he went to the young whippersnappers that he grew up with, and he got their counsel too, which was probably not a good idea. And they said, you tell him that your little finger's going to be thicker than your father's loins, that he chastised you with whips, I'll chastise you with scorpions. And for whatever reason, Rehoboam chose the counsel of the young men. And he ended up losing a lot of the people of Israel because of that. But anyway, it says there in 2 Chronicles 10 and verse 8, it says, "But he forsook the counsel which the old men gave him, and took counsel with the young men that were brought up with him, that stood before him." And then the rest of it goes as I just said. So he did not hear the instruction of a father. He didn't take the counsel of the old men. He rather went to foolish counsel and took that. And to take foolish counsel is probably worse than taking any counsel at all. So in his case, he did not listen. And such is often the case with great men. A lot of times, not always, but a lot of times the children of great men, of rich men, don't end up doing very well. And the reason is for that, one of the reasons anyway, is they haven't put in the hard work that their parents put in to get where their parents are. And you just put yourself in the shoes of somebody, maybe even not rich, but just somebody that was really well-to-do. Maybe your parents made a couple $100,000 a year or something. You live in a big, nice house. You got lots of nice new vehicles and boats and toys and whatever. You get all this stuff that heart could wish, right? And you take big, lavish vacations all over the place. And what's the kid going to think? He's going to think that this is just normal. This is how life is. Well, whenever he gets out in the real world, unless his parents are just going to pay for everything for him for the rest of his life, and that could happen. But if that doesn't happen, he actually has to get out there and earn like they did, he's going to find out this is not the real world, right? My parents are the exception, not the rule. And so anyway, a lot of times I think this is why the kids of rich people end up being losers, basically. That they never had to work for anything. Their parents handed them everything, and then they never make anything they never make anything of themselves, and their parents end up coming to the rescue their whole lives. And you've probably seen this before. Maybe not with rich parents and kids, but just with parents and kids. Their kids just are duds, and the parents just keep coming to the aid of the kid year after year, and they never make anything of themselves. And that's kind of sad. And I don't know if was that what happened to Rehoboam? Could be. I don't know. But to bring it to something personal with our own experience, Christians can face a similar concern with their children, in a spiritual sense, though. And it's especially the case with parents who were converted from a life of sin and error, they're thus deeply appreciative of the salvation and the knowledge of the truth that they have in Christ. So just pick somebody. Now, a lot of you guys, you kind of grew up in the faith, not exactly the same, but pretty similar, and you grew up in something similar, and then you grew up in the true church, right? And so you're not exactly what I'm talking about here. Not that you don't deeply love the Lord. That's not what I'm saying. But you picture somebody that was just an outright hellion sinner, didn't know anything about the Lord, and then he's converted out of that life, and he knows, and maybe he went through a bunch of versions of Christianity like I did and like a lot of people did, and so they know what it's like to live in a gutter, and they also know what it's like to go from one false religion to the next, and trying to save themselves and everybody they meet and all this stuff. And when they finally are converted to the truth, I mean, they're going to latch onto that because they know what else is out there, right? But then when their kids get brought up, though, their kids aren't going to have that experience, right? They haven't been through what the parents had been through. They hadn't lived in a moral cesspool. They hadn't been, gone from church to church and been involved in all these false religions and who knows did what, spoke in tongues or all kinds of crazy stuff like some people have. So the kids aren't going to appreciate what how in the same way that the parents do, unless the parents do a really good job of teaching them and explaining to them the importance of the church and the importance of the truth, and tell them what else is out there, and share your own experience with them, what I've been saved from. Then the kids could appreciate it to a certain extent anyway. They're never going to appreciate it in the same way. You can just imagine that. And any of us can imagine that in various areas of life. If you haven't been through a horrible situation, you're just never really going to understand exactly what it's like, right? You're never going to appreciate it like somebody that has been through something like that. So that's why the children of such Christians then need to be properly instructed by their parents, because if they're not, then there's a high likelihood that they'll end up not walking in the faith to the same degree, if at all, like their parents have. And that's the thing, that's the challenge for any child growing up in the church, in the true church, is that they don't have the personal experience. So the parents have to do an extra good job of training them up and showing them the importance of Jesus Christ and of his salvation and of the church and the truth and all those things. And I've seen this happen in other churches. Probably a lot of you have too. You've probably seen or know of people that they were converted out of false religion, and then they had children. And I'm not saying they're not good parents, but they had children, and for whatever reason, the children did not follow in the footsteps, right? The children did not embrace the faith. And, I mean, maybe they're just not regenerate. That could be. Or maybe their parents never really explained to them and let them know really how important the church is. And I don't know. But anyway, the point is, I just don't want that to happen to us. And if I have children, I don't want it to happen to me, right? I want to do my best to train them up and give them an appreciation for what we have here, even though they won't have to go through, thankfully, the same stuff that I did, both morally and religiously. And this happened to Israel, the generation of Israel that came out of the Promised Land, or that came into the Promised Land. They came out of Egypt and went through the wilderness. That generation saw the mighty power of God, but the next generation didn't see it. And because of that, they were not faithful like the first generation was. If you look in Judges chapter 2 and verse 10. Judges 2 and verse 10. And the thing is, it's like any child training thing, but the religious training, you've got a space of time, and then once that space of time's up, when they're 17, 18 years old or something, and then it's like, oh boy, I better try to make up for lost time. You ain't gonna make up for lost time, more than likely. What's done is done. Beg for God's mercy. Hopefully he visits them later on in their life. They remember what they heard and what they were taught. But once the time's gone, it's gone. So you don't want to have to look back with regret in that, when that time comes. Judges 2 and verse 10. It says, "And also all that generation were gathered unto their fathers. And there arose another generation after them, which knew not the Lord, nor yet the works which he had done for Israel. And the children of Israel," and here's the result. "The children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord and served Baalim." They didn't see the mighty works. They didn't see the Egyptian army drown. They didn't see the parting of the Red Sea. They didn't see the clothes not wearing out for 40 days. They didn't see water out of the rock. They didn't see the manna coming down from heaven. They didn't see the quails knee deep for as far as the eye could see. They didn't see all that stuff. They didn't see the Lord overthrowing all these nations as they went into the promised land and walking around Jericho and all the walls falling down. They didn't see that stuff. And their parents didn't apparently do a good job of reminding them and telling them and teaching them and telling them, hey, this is what happened. This is what the Lord did for us, and impressing that upon them for all those years. And what happened? They served Baal. They went after false religion because they didn't have an appreciation for the true. And we don't want that to happen to us. This is why God instructed the fathers in Israel to teach their children the law of God so that they don't forget the Lord. Psalm 78, 4 through 7. And this goes right to the proverb that we're looking at. "My son, hear the instruction of a father." Psalm 78, 4 through 7. A lot of different things you can instruct your children on, and should, but the most important thing are the things of the Lord. Psalm 78, 4 through 7. It says, "We will not hide them from their children, showing to the generation to come the praises of the Lord, and his strength, and his wonderful works that he hath done. For he established a testimony in Jacob, and appointed a law in Israel, which he commanded our fathers, that they should make them known to their children, that the generation to come might know them, even the children which should be born, who should arise and declare them to their children." See, this is a generational thing. We keep passing it down. "That they might set their hope in God and not forget the works of God, but keep his commandments, and might not be as their fathers, a stubborn and rebellious generation, a generation that set not their heart aright, and whose spirit was not steadfast with God." So even if you didn't experience it yourself, it's still incumbent to pass this down, right? Because the Lord doesn't want the children to forget the works of the Lord, even though they didn't see the works of the Lord themselves. They can still learn the works of the Lord, right? And so we can still learn. I mean, we're still learning the works of the Lord back there when Israel came out of Egypt, and that's been thousands of years ago. We don't want to forget those things, nor do we want to forget about our own deliverances that God has given us in our own lives. And I was just reminded, as I was reading this passage, I had said up in Minneapolis at one time that the kids up there, one day, their trial of faith was going to come. Because that's what happens. If you grow up in the church, you might not have to go through the process that some of us had to go through to come out of false religion, to come out of a filthy, sinful life and things like that. But what you will have is there will be a trial of your faith. There will be a crisis whenever you then are going to have to make this decision. Is this my religion or is it mom and dad's religion? And sadly, up there, they didn't pass the test. Right? Those boys didn't pass the test. Turns out, I guess it was mom and dad's religion. And when mom and dad were gone, so were they. And that's pretty sad. So though this duty, I missed a point there. So this principle, in Psalm 78, 4 through 7, of the fathers in Israel to instruct their children, this principle is still incumbent upon Christian fathers today who are to bring up their children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Ephesians 6 and verse 4. Ephesians 6 and verse 4. My son, hear the instruction of a father. This is Paul's teaching the exact same thing that Solomon was. Ephesians 6:2-4, or just 6:4, pardon me. And ye fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. And when you do that, then you apply that proverb, or then the child applies that proverb. Hear the instruction of a father. Now, though this duty of imparting the law of God to children is primarily given to fathers, Solomon also charges the mother, or the child, that is, to forsake not the law of thy mother. So this is mother and father are involved in this, certainly. But notice how it's the instruction to the father is given first. My son, hear the instruction of a father, and forsake not the law of thy mother, right? It's always, the father always comes first. In Psalm 78, it was the fathers were teaching the children. In Ephesians 6:4, it's the fathers instructing the children. Now, our society has this parental precept turned on its head. And most of the instruction to children comes from their mothers, and barely any, if any, in some situations, comes from their fathers. And this shouldn't be the way it is. But if you think about it today, isn't it considered that pretty much like the spiritual instruction given to a child, it's just assumed that, well, that's what the mother does, right? Because that's just like, that's the mother's job. That's what we think today. But that you aren't going to find that in the Bible. Nowhere. Go to Sunday school classes, which are not scriptural, but let's just the principle of children being taught the scriptures. Who are all the Sunday school teachers? It's always women. I can't think of ever, in all the years I went to Sunday school, I don't think I ever had a male Sunday school teacher. It's always women. Why is that? Well, it's because basically fathers have abdicated their duty is what it comes down to. I think, and the women are just kind of stepping up to the plate, and that's not the way it should be. Fathers should be the primary instructor of their children, especially in spiritual matters. Now, just think about this. Why do you think that, quote, Christianity, and I put that in quotes, why do you think it's been so feminized over the last few generations? Right? You think about Christianity, it's very soft, right? It's very womanly, right? And women are great, but, you know, the Bibles can be a lot, I mean, there can be some tough stuff, some harsh stuff in there, right? I mean, Christian life is warfare, right? But today we have a feminized, soft version of Christianity. You don't want to rebuke people. You don't want to judge people. You don't want to tell anybody they're wrong, right? You just want to kind of tiptoe around the tulips and keep everybody happy, right? But that's not what the Bible teaches. And I think a lot of that has to do with women picking up the baton and not the men. Why do you think churches are ran by women? Same reason, right? It all starts at home, starts at Sunday school, starts in those places. Now, this verse implies something. Don't look at the outline. I don't want you to look. I don't want you to cheat. I want you to just notice something. Turn back to Proverbs 1:8. And I just want to see if you can just get just a very basic implication from this verse. So let's look at Proverbs 1:8 and just kind of big picture. See if you can get an implication here. Proverbs 1:8. My son, hear the instruction of thy father, and forsake not the law of thy mother. Can anybody just look at that and just see, okay, here's just a general lesson that's being taught here in this proverb.
Do you want us to actually answer?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That the parents are unified?
That's true. What are they unified in? What are the parents supposed to be doing? I mean, what is basically taken for granted in this text? It's written to a child, right? But what is taken for granted that parents should be doing in this text? Instructing, right? Teaching, instructing, commanding even, right? This is the implication of the verse. Fathers and mothers should be instructing and giving laws to their children and commanding their children. I'll give you a verse for that. Proverbs 6 and verse 20. Now, this verse isn't actually written to parents. It doesn't say, parents, instruct your children and give laws to your children, but that's just implied in the text, right? That's a given. Proverbs chapter 6 and verse 20. It says, my son, keep thy father's commandment and forsake not the law of thy mother. Very similar text there, only it's instead of instruction, it's commandment. What's that tell me? An instruction should be a commandment, right? I see far too often parents, I mean, you probably see this too, you see it all over the place. Parents asking, suggesting, bribing or begging their children to do what they want them to do. You see it all the time. It drives me crazy. I mean, how many times have you heard somebody say like, Johnny, would you like to clean your room? I mean, that's a question, and Johnny could say, well, no, actually, I wouldn't like to. Or, Johnny, I would like you to clean your room. Well, that's nice, Mom, nice, Dad, that you'd like me to, but I don't feel like it, right? I would like you to, or would you like to, that is not a commandment. That is not instruction. That's a desire. Or, please clean your room. Well, I mean, you said please, so I could say, well, I don't feel like it, right? How about, Johnny, clean your room? That's instruction. That's a commandment, right? Johnny, clean your room now, right? There's a big difference between would you like to, I would like you to, please, and do it, right? That's what biblical instruction is supposed to be. So I say don't ask, command. I'm not saying you don't have to be mean, right? I mean, my boss at work's not mean when he says, go pick up those kids or whatever he says to do, go out there and, get that bus checked over before the route or whatever. I mean, I'll say, man, that guy's mean. He didn't say, Chad, I would like you to go out there and drive that bus route today. Would you like to drive that bus route today? I mean, can you imagine if your boss said, I would like it if you would do this. Would you please? I'm like, what the heck's wrong with you? You're the boss. You tell me what to do. You don't ask me what to do. In this generation, a quick scroll down the grocery store aisle will confirm that children are not subject to their parents, but rather they are their oppressors. Look at Isaiah 3 and verse 12. Isaiah 3 and verse 12. It says, as for my people, children are their oppressors, and women rule over them. O my people, they which lead thee cause thee to err, and destroy the way of thy paths. I'm sure we've all been around children to know enough to realize that they are not the ones that should be telling us what to do, because they don't have a whole lot of sense yet, right? We should be telling them what to do, not them telling us what to do or telling us what they're going to do. My dad and I were just talking the other day, and he was telling me about a friend of mine. I didn't know this, but I think he was a year younger than me. And he said one time that this guy's dad was over there doing some work at my dad's house, and his son comes over, and I think he was a teenager or something, and he says, oh, I'm going to go do this and that. He was going to run around and do something, and he's like, well, no, I need your help tonight. You need to help me do this or that. And he's like, Dad, I wasn't coming over here to ask. I was just telling you, I'm going out, and you just let it go, and he just went out, did whatever he wanted. And I'm thinking, man, I would have knocked that kid silly. Obviously he wasn't doing anything for his whole life, apparently, for a kid to talk to his dad like that. That's just unbelievable. But anyway, children are their oppressors. This shouldn't be that way. Is it any wonder that our society is in such a dismal state? And I know this is kind of one of my soapbox issues, and I've irritated people with these things in the past, but anyway, it's in the text, so I gotta do it, and it certainly doesn't hurt me to do it. It never hurts me to talk about this topic, because it's just there's just so much. I just see so much pitiful stuff going on out there in the world, and especially now as a bus driver, and I see the way that kids act, and they act a certain way because their parents allow them to act a certain way, and it's just our country and our society is in a mess. So Solomon's warning ought to be heeded by all children who should obey and honor their parents in all things. Of course, we have Colossians 3 and verse 20. Paul here is telling children the same thing that Solomon was telling children. So Braden, listen up to this one. Colossians 3:20. Children, obey your parents in all things, for this is well-pleasing unto the Lord. So if you want to please God, listen to your parents. Obey them in all things. Whatever they tell you to do, you do it. And then you'll be pleasing to God. Ephesians 6, 2 through 3. 1 through 3. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor thy father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise, that it may be well with thee, and that thou mayest live long on the earth. That's the fifth commandment in the law of Moses. think it's the fifth. Yeah, fifth commandment. But it's the first commandment with a promise. The promise is that if you do it, it'll be well with thee and you'll live long on the earth. So God extends with it a promise. So we always want to honor our parents, as long as it doesn't cause us to dishonor God, of course, with that caveat. Now there's another important lesson here from Solomon's words, and that is to heed good counsel even when it comes from a hypocrite. You think about that. Remember, he said, hear the instruction of a father, and forsake not the law of thy mother. Right? But the thing is about Solomon, he did not take his own advice. He was a hypocrite. He did forsake the law of his mother. Turn to Proverbs 31 and verse 1. Proverbs 31 and verse 1. But even though he's a hypocrite, we should still listen to him. Proverbs 31:1, it says, the words of King Lemuel, the prophecy that his mother taught him. Now, I can't prove this absolutely, but I believe that King Lemuel was another name for Solomon. And I've read what some of the commentators think, and they say the same thing. I'm not sure who else King Lemuel would be. There's no other Lemuel in the scripture, so there's no king of Israel named Lemuel or something. And since these are the Proverbs of Solomon, it would appear certainly that Lemuel was kind of maybe a pet name or a nickname or a close familiar name or something for King Solomon. In this prophecy, it says here that his mother taught him. And his mother warned him not to give his strength unto women, nor his ways to that which destroy kings. Let's read verses 2 through 3. What, my son, and what the son of my womb, and what the son of my vows? Give not thy strength unto women, nor thy ways to that which destroyeth kings. So his mother warned him to beware of women, because women can lead a young man astray. And a good wife from the Lord is a wonderful blessing, but a bad woman is a horrible curse, right? Bad women can really wreak havoc on a man. You ever heard of a guy named Adam? Remember what his wife did? Remember Adam and Eve? Right? You heard about him? Right? His wife said, hey, eat this fruit. Now, it was his own fault he did it, but still, she suggested it, right? How about Samson. Samson was strongest man, right? But very strong anyway. And he was brought down by a woman. And it was, she's like, oh, come on, don't you love me? Right? You ever heard, if you love me, you'll tell me the secret, right? And then she constantly wearies him, and eventually he tells her the secret about his hair, and the Philistines come in, they chop his hair off, and then he loses all his strength. And Solomon is another example. How about David, a man after God's own heart? Right? Now, this was not Bathsheba's fault, but Bathsheba, he was tempted, allowed himself to be tempted by Bathsheba. He was brought down by a woman. And Solomon is another example of this. He did not listen to his mother. Look at 1 Kings 11 and verse 4. 1 Kings 11 and verse 4. Yes.
I can't remember the exact quote. It's better to dwell in the corner of a rooftop than in a wide house with a brawling woman.
Yep, that's right. Yep.
I can't remember where it's at, but I know it's in there.
Yep, that's right. There's two of them. Better to dwell in the corner of the housetop than with a brawling woman in a wide house, and better to dwell in the wilderness than with a contentious and an angry woman, I think it is.
You wouldn't want to deal with an angry woman.
Hmm?
You would not want to deal with an angry woman.
Right. And then there's the one, the contentions, because the contentions of a wife is a continual dropping, remember, in a rainy day. You can just imagine drip, 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 just on and on and on all night long, or something, just drive you nuts, right? Nag, nag, nag. You see that? They got that sign over there. Our neighbor made that for us.
Horse.
Yes.
So if the guy had a foolish son and a contentious wife, he would want to run screaming from the house.
Yes, he would. Yes, he'd be in the loony bin. Okay, so Solomon did not. He forsook the law of his mother. 1 Kings 11 and verse 4. Or think of Ahab. Now, Ahab certainly was not a godly king by any stretch of the imagination, But as bad as Ahab was, Jezebel was worse, and it says that Jezebel stirred him up. So if you are a wicked, stupid king, and then you have a really bad woman on top of that to stir you up, think Bill Clinton and Hillary or something like that, I mean, you're really in a bad way. 1 Kings 11 and verse 4. 1 Kings 11 and verse 4. Let's just start with verse 3. It says, and he had, this is Solomon, 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned away his heart. For it came to pass when Solomon was old that his wives turned away his heart after other gods, and his heart was not perfect with the Lord his God, as was the heart of David, his father. You know, David had a lot of faults, but David's heart was in the right place. David just let his flesh overcome him sometimes, but his heart was in the right place. But Solomon's heart wasn't perfect. His wives turned it away towards false gods. And that's exactly what his mother warned him about. Give not thy strength unto women, nor thy ways to that which destroyeth kings. He ended up destroying himself because he went after these women of other religions, and they took his heart away from the Lord. Nehemiah said in Nehemiah 13 and verse 26, when he was concerned about Israelites there in his day marrying women of other nations, and in those days other nations means other religions for sure, and Nehemiah was irritated because there's so much intermarrying going on here that a lot of these people couldn't even speak in the Jews' language anymore in verse 24 because they'd taken them wives from the other nations. And he says in verse 25, and I contended with them, and cursed them, and smote certain of them, and plucked off their hair, and made them swear by God, saying, Ye shall not give your daughters unto their sons, nor take their daughters unto your sons, or for yourselves. Did not Solomon, king of Israel, sin by these things? Yet among many nations was there no king like him, who was beloved of his God, and God made him king over all Israel. Nevertheless, even him, the wisest man that ever lived, save the Lord Jesus Christ, even him did outlandish women cause to sin. So you don't want to go marry a woman from some false religion or something like that, because they will cause you to sin.